Hello, my dear dreamers. If you enjoy this story, please do subscribe. Welcome back to another evening of shared stories and quiet wonder. Tonight, we journey far back through the mists of time to a land of golden sands and eternal rivers, of towering temples and gods who walked among mortals. We are going to ancient Egypt, to the great temple complex of Karnak, where the morning sun paints the sandstone columns in shades of honey and amber. You are a young scribe, dedicated to the sacred work of preserving the old stories, the legends that have been passed down through countless generations. Your name is Ka, and you serve in one of the most magnificent temples ever built by human hands. So settle in, pull your blankets close, and let us begin this journey together through the land of the Pharaohs. You wake to the sound of temple bells. They ring out across the complex in a cascade of bronze and copper tones, calling the priests and servants to their morning duties. For a long, drowsy moment, you simply lie there on your reader mat, watching the first pale light of dawn creep through the small window high on your chamber wall. The air is still cool, carrying the faint sweetness of lotus blossoms from the sacred lake, and the ever-present whisper of incense that seems to permeate every stone of this ancient place. Your chamber is modest but comfortable. The walls are plastered smooth and painted with simple geometric patterns in red and blue. A wooden chest holds your few possessions, your spare linen kilt, your writing palette, your small collection of amulets given to you by your mother when you first came to serve the temple 5 years ago. Above your sleeping mat, a small shrine holds a figurine of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing, your patron and protector in your sacred work. You stretch slowly, feeling the pleasant ache of muscles that spent yesterday hunched over papyrus scrolls. Being a scribe is not physically demanding work, not like the laborers who haul stone blocks or the farmers who tend the fields along the Nile. But it has its own kind of strain. The careful attention required to form each hieroglyph perfectly, the focused concentration that leaves you mentally exhausted by evening. The bells ring again, more insistently this time, and you know you cannot linger any longer. You rise from your mat and pad across the cool floor to your wash basin. The water inside was drawn yesterday from the sacred lake and blessed by the priests of Sobek. You add a pinch of natron salt from a small clay pot, watching it dissolve and cloud the water briefly before clearing again. Natron purifies both body and spirit, or so the old priests say, and you have come to believe them. There is something about starting each day with this simple ritual that makes you feel clean in ways that go beyond mere washing. You cup your hands and splash the cool water across your face, gasping slightly at the shock of it. Then you wet a linen cloth and wash your arms, your chest, your legs, scrubbing away the sweat of sleep. The morning air raises goosebumps on your damp skin, but it is a pleasant sensation, invigorating rather than uncomfortable. By the time you finish and dry yourself with a fresh cloth, you feel truly awake and ready to face whatever the day might bring. Your kilt is freshly laundered, the white linen still carrying the faint smell of the sun under which it dried. You wrap it around your waist with practiced ease, tucking and folding until it hangs just right. Over this, you drape a simple sash of pale blue, the color marking you as a servant of the House of Life, the temple's great library and scriptorium where all the sacred texts are copied and preserved. Before leaving your chamber, you pause at your small shrine. You light a tiny stick of incense, watching the fragrant smoke curl upward toward the ceiling. O Thoth, you murmur, Lord of divine words and master of the sacred script, guide my hand this day. Let my work honor you and preserve the wisdom of the ages. The ibis-headed figurine seems to regard you with patient approval, though perhaps that is merely your imagination. You bow your head briefly, then turn and step out into the corridor. The temple complex of Karnak is vast beyond easy comprehension. You have lived here for 5 years now, and still you sometimes lose your way in its maze of corridors, courtyards, and chambers. It sprawls across hundreds of acres, a city unto itself dedicated to the worship of Amun-Ra, king of the gods, and to the countless other deities who share his divine household. Generations of pharaohs have added to it, each one seeking to outdo his predecessors in piety and magnificence. The result is a labyrinth of sacred spaces that could take a lifetime to fully explore. This morning, as every morning, you make your way through the familiar passages toward the House of Life. The corridors are coming alive with activity. Priests in their white robes hurry past on their way to perform the morning rituals. Servants carry offerings of bread and beer and fresh flowers toward the inner sanctuaries. A group of young acolytes, boys even younger than yourself, trudge sleepily behind a stern-faced teacher on their way to lessons. You emerge into one of the outer courtyards, and the full glory of the morning sun strikes you like a blessing. The great columns rise around you like a forest of stone trees, their surfaces carved with hieroglyphs and images of gods and pharaohs. The sandstone glows warm gold in the morning light, and high above, the capitals of the columns spread out like papyrus flowers, their painted surfaces still bright with color despite centuries of sun and wind. You pause for a moment, as you often do, simply to take it all in, no matter how many mornings you spend here. The beauty of this place never fails to move you. Men built this, you think, ordinary men with hands and tools and determination. They raised these massive stones towards heaven in honor of the gods, and the gods have blessed their work with a beauty that transcends the merely human. Standing here in the slanting morning light, with the incense smoke drifting and the chanting of priests echoing from distant chambers, it is easy to believe that the gods are very real and very present, but there is work to be done, and you cannot spend all morning in contemplation. You continue on your way, passing through another colonnade, and emerging at last into the courtyard that fronts the House of Life. This building is older than most of the temple complex, its stones darker and more weathered, its carvings worn smooth by countless hands and countless years. Here is where the sacred texts are stored, thousands upon thousands of papyrus scrolls containing everything from religious hymns to medical treatises to astronomical calculations. Here is where scribes like yourself spend their days copying and preserving this accumulated wisdom, ensuring that it will survive for generations yet to come. You enter through the main doorway, passing between two statues of Thoth that guard the entrance. The interior is cooler than the courtyard outside, the thick stone walls holding back the heat of the day. Oil lamps flicker in alcoves, casting pools of warm light across the plastered walls. The air smells of papyrus and ink and old leather, a smell you have come to love more than any perfume. Your workspace is in the main scriptorium, a long hall lined with writing desks where dozens of scribes labor each day. You make your way to your usual spot, a desk near one of the high windows where the light is good but not too harsh. Your tools are waiting for you, arranged just as you left them yesterday. Your palette with its two ink cakes, one of black carbon ink and one of red ochre. Your collection of reed pens, each one carefully cut and maintained. Your water pot for moistening the inks. Your smoothing stones and scraping knives for preparing papyrus. A small basket holds clean sheets of papyrus, and another holds completed work waiting to be reviewed by the senior scribes. You settle onto your cushion and begin preparing for the day's work. First, you moisten your black ink, adding a few drops of water and grinding it with a small pestle until it reaches the proper consistency. Too thin, and it will spread and blur on the papyrus. Too thick, and it will clog your pen and leave uneven lines. You test it on a scrap piece, making a few careful strokes and nod in satisfaction. The ink flows smoothly, leaving crisp black marks on the pale surface. You are just selecting your first pen when a shadow falls across your desk. You look up to see Moriah, the head priest of the House of Life, standing over you. Moriah is old, his head shaved smooth in the priestly fashion, his face creased with decades of squinting at tiny hieroglyphs. But his eyes are still sharp, and his mind is sharper still. He knows the contents of nearly every scroll in the archive, and he can quote from memory texts that most scribes would struggle to read even with the original in front of them. "Ka," he says, his voice a dry rasp. "I have a special task for you today." You set down your pen and bow your head respectfully. "I am honored, master. How may I serve?" Moriah produces a scroll from within his robes. The papyrus is old. You can tell at a glance, yellowed with age and brittle at the edges. The cord that binds it is faded linen, and the seal is a type you do not recognize, bearing the symbol of Osiris, lord of the underworld. This was found in a sealed chamber during the recent construction work on the south wing, Moriah explains. We believe it dates to the Middle Kingdom, perhaps 800 years old or more. The text is faded in places and difficult to read. I want you to make a fresh copy, preserving every word exactly as it appears. Can you do this? You take the scroll carefully, reverently. It weighs almost nothing, but you feel the weight of ages in your hands. What does it contain, master? Moriah's old face creases into something that might be a smile. It is the legend of Osiris and Isis, the full account, as told by the priests of ancient times. Many versions of this story exist, of course. But this one is special. This one comes from the earliest days, when the memory of the gods walking among us was still fresh in the minds of men. Your heart beats faster. The legend of Osiris is perhaps the most sacred of all Egyptian stories, the tale of the good god who was murdered by his jealous brother and brought back to life by his faithful wife. It is the story that explains death and resurrection, the story that gives meaning to all the elaborate funerary rituals, the story that promises even common people like yourself the hope of eternal life. I will treat it with the utmost care, you promise. Every word shall be preserved exactly. I know you will, that is why I chose you for this task. Merira places a gnarled hand on your shoulder. Take your time, young scribe. This is not work to be rushed. Let the story speak to you as you copy it, and let it fill your heart with wonder. These old tales are more than mere words on papyrus. They are the living truth of our world, the explanation of how all things came to be, and why all things are as they are. He turns and shuffles away, leaving you alone with the ancient scroll. For a long moment you simply sit there, holding it in your hands, feeling the brittle papyrus beneath your fingers. Then, slowly, carefully, you break the ancient seal and unroll the first section of the document. The hieroglyphs swim before your eyes, faded and cramped in the ancient style. It takes you several minutes to adjust, to begin recognizing the old forms that differ slightly from the script you learned. But gradually, the words begin to resolve themselves, and you start to read. In the beginning, when earth and sky were one, and the waters of chaos covered all, there was only Nun, the primordial ocean, and from Nun arose Atom, the complete one, the first god, born of himself, existing before existence. You reach for your pen, dip it in ink, and begin to copy. The familiar rhythm of the work settles over you like a comfortable blanket. Pen to ink, ink to papyrus, stroke by careful stroke. The morning sun climbs higher outside, but you barely notice. The temple bells ring to mark the passing hours, but they seem distant, unimportant. All that matters is the story unfolding beneath your pen, the tale of gods and mortals, of love and betrayal, of death and eternal life. The legend of Osiris has begun, and with it, your journey into the heart of ancient Egyptian mythology. But that, dear dreamer, is a tale for the next chapter. For now, rest easy in the knowledge that you are exactly where you are meant to be, a keeper of sacred stories in a land where stories are the very stuff of life. The morning passes in a kind of sacred trance. Your pen moves across the fresh papyrus with steady, measured strokes, and with each hieroglyph you copy, you feel yourself sinking deeper into the ancient tale. The scriptorium buzzes with quiet activity around you. Other scribes bent over their own work. The soft scratch of reed pens on papyrus creating a gentle chorus. But you are barely aware of any of it. Your entire world has narrowed to the yellowed scroll before you, and the fresh white sheet beneath your hand. The story begins, as all Egyptian stories must, with the creation of the world. In the time before time, when there was neither earth nor sky nor anything that exists, there was only Nun. Nun was the primordial water, dark and infinite and utterly still. Within Nun lay all potential, all possibility, all that would ever be, but nothing yet had form or name or substance. You copy these words carefully, feeling their weight. The Egyptians have always believed that water came first, and why not? The Nile is the source of all life in this land. Without its annual flood, there would be no Egypt, only endless deserts stretching from horizon to horizon. It makes perfect sense that the first thing to exist would be water, the life-giver, the sustainer. And from the waters of none, continues the ancient text, there arose a mound of earth, the first solid thing in all of existence. This was the sacred mound, the Ben-Ben, and upon it appeared Atum, the complete one. Atum was alone, the first and only god, born of himself from the waters of chaos. He looked out upon the endless darkness and knew that he must create light and life to fill the void. You pause in your copying to rest your hand and consider these words. The Ben-Ben, the primordial mound. You have seen representations of it throughout the temple, that sacred pyramid shape that tops the obelisks and adorns the shrines. It represents the first moment of creation, the instant when something emerged from nothing. Every temple in Egypt is built to echo this moment, rising from the ground like that first mound rose from the waters. Atum was lonely in his solitary existence. The text continues, and so he brought forth from himself 2 children. He sneezed, and from his breath came Shu, god of the air and light. He spat, and from his moisture came Tefnut, goddess of rain and dew. These 2 were the first divine pair, brother and sister, husband and wife, as was the custom of the gods. The idea of gods creating other gods through such simple bodily functions might seem strange, but you have learned that the Egyptians see the divine in everything, even the most mundane aspects of existence. A sneeze, a breath, a drop of moisture. These are all manifestations of life force and what is creation but the ultimate expression of that force. Shu and Tefnut wandered far from their father Atum, exploring the infinite darkness that still surrounded the first mound. Atum grew worried for his children and sent his eye to search for them. When at last the eye found them and brought them home, Atum wept with joy, and from his tears sprang the first human beings. You smile at this detail as you copy it. Humans born from the tears of joy shed by the Creator God. It speaks to the Egyptian belief that humanity is precious to the gods, not an afterthought or an accident, but a product of divine love. You have heard priests debate whether the tears were of joy or sorrow, and whether this explains why human life is tinged with both happiness and grief. But you prefer the version in this old scroll, the version where humans are born from a father's joy at being reunited with his children. Shu and Tefnut in turn had children of their own. The text continues. They brought forth Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. But these 2 loved each other so deeply that they remained locked in an eternal embrace, with no space between them for anything else to exist. And so Shu, their father, lifted Nut up and away from Geb, holding her high above the earth, creating the space in which all life would flourish. You have seen this image countless times, painted on ceilings and carved on sarcophagi. Nut arched overhead, her body studded with stars, her fingers and toes touching the horizon at the 4 corners of the world. Geb lying below, his body forming the mountains and valleys of the earth, and Shu between them, the air that separates sky from earth, the space in which birds fly and humans walk, and all living things draw breath. But Nut was already pregnant, the scroll continues, and her father's separation from Geb filled her with sorrow. Ra, the sun god who had emerged from Atum and now ruled the heavens, was angry with Nut for her disobedience in loving her brother so completely. He cursed her, declaring that she could give birth on no day of the year. Here, the story takes a turn toward the cleaver and the magical, the kind of twist that delights Egyptian storytellers. Nut was heartbroken, for she could feel her children growing within her, demanding to be born. In her desperation, she sought the help of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing. Thoth was cunning beyond measure, and he devised a plan to help the sky goddess. You glance up at your small figurine of Thoth perched on your desk where you can see it while you work. God of scribes, god of wisdom, god of the moon and magic and all learning, he is your patron. And you feel a special warmth when he appears in the stories you copy. Thoth went to the moon, who was then as bright as the sun and ruled half of the sky. He challenged the moon to a game of Sinet, the ancient board game that even gods enjoy playing. The stakes were high, for Thoth wagered for a portion of the moon's light itself. Game after game they played, and game after game Thoth won, for none could match his wisdom and strategy. You know Senet well. The game boards are common throughout Egypt, and you have spent many pleasant evenings playing with your fellow scribes. The thought of Thoth himself playing the same game, but for divine stakes, fills you with a quiet joy. By the time the games were done, Thoth had won enough of the moon's light to create 5 extra days, days that stood outside the regular year, days when Ra's curse had no power. These were the epigomenal days, the 5 days added to the 360-day calendar to make the year complete. And on each of these 5 extra days, Nut gave birth to a child. Here the text pauses, and you sense that you are approaching the heart of the story. You dip your pen in ink, steady your hand, and continue copying. On the first day was born Osiris, and at the moment of his birth, a voice rang out across the world proclaiming that the Lord of all had come into being. He was beautiful and good, his skin the green of living plants or the black of fertile soil. He was destined for greatness from his first breath. On the second day was born Horus the Elder, falcon-headed and fierce, a god of the sky and of kingship. Some say this Horus is different from the Horus who would later be born to Isis, and some say they are aspects of the same divine being. The mysteries of the gods are not always clear to mortal minds. On the third day was born Set, and his birth was violent and strange. He did not emerge from his mother in the normal way, but tore himself from her side, impatient and furious even in the moment of his arrival. His skin was red, the color of the desert and of chaos, and his face was that of a strange beast that no one could name. From the beginning, there was something wild and dangerous about Set. On the 4th day was born Isis, most beloved of all the goddesses. She was beautiful beyond measure, wise and powerful, skilled in magic above all other beings. Even as an infant, she radiated grace and compassion. She would become the model for all wives and mothers, the protector of the dead, the throne upon which kings sit. On the fifth and final day was born Nephthys, lady of the house, goddess of morning and the night. She was gentler than her siblings, quieter, often overlooked but never unimportant. She would stand by her sister Isis in the darkest times, loyal and steadfast. These were the children of Nut and Geb. The text concludes this section. 5 gods born on 5 impossible days, each destined to shape the world in ways both glorious and terrible. And among them, Osiris and Set, brothers, who would become the bitterest of enemies, their conflict echoing through all of Egyptian history. You set down your pen and flex your fingers. The morning has slipped away while you worked, and you realize that your stomach is growling with hunger. The bells will soon ring for the midday meal, and you should rest your eyes in your hand before continuing. But before you rise, you read over what you have copied, checking for errors and marveling at the tale. The creation of the world, the birth of the gods, the setting of the stage for the great drama to come. It is a story you have heard many times in various forms, but there is something powerful about seeing it laid out in this ancient hand, knowing that scribes like yourself copied these same words centuries ago, passing them down through generation after generation. The legend continues, of course. The best part is yet to come. The story of how Osiris became king and how Set's jealousy led to the greatest betrayal in all of mythology. But that, dear dreamer, must wait for now. The temple bells are ringing, and even scribes must eat. You rise from your cushion, carefully weighing down the corners of your work so no stray breeze can disturb it, and make your way out of the scriptorium into the brilliant midday sun. The midday meal is simple but satisfying. You sit in the courtyard with the other scribes, sharing bread that is still warm from the temple bakery, along with dates and figs and a mild cheese made from goat's milk. There is beer, of course, the thick, slightly sweet beverage that everyone drinks, from the lowest peasant to the pharaoh himself. Water from the Nile is not always safe to drink, but beer, processed and fermented, nourishes without risk. You eat in companionable silence for the most part, too tired from the morning's concentration for much conversation. But one of the older scribes, a man named Hori, who has served in the House of Life for nearly 30 years, notices the look of absorption on your face. You are working on something special, he observes, tearing off a piece of bread. I can always tell. You get that faraway look, like you are living inside the text rather than merely copying it. You nod, swallowing a mouthful of dates. Mary has given me an ancient scroll to transcribe. The legend of Osiris from the Middle Kingdom. Hori's eyebrows rise. That is indeed special. The older versions are always the most powerful. They have a rawness to them, a directness that later tellings sometimes lose. He pauses, chewing thoughtfully. Have you reached the betrayal yet? Not yet. I have just finished the birth of the 5 children of Nut. Ah, Hori nods slowly. Then the best is yet to come, and the worst. He looks at you with something like sympathy in his eyes. It is a difficult story, young Ka, beautiful and terrible in equal measure, Do not let it weigh too heavily on your heart. You thank him for his advice and finish your meal in thoughtful silence. Then you return to the scriptorium, eager to continue despite Hori's warning, or perhaps because of it. The best stories are always the ones that leave marks on your soul. Settling back onto your cushion, you unroll the next section of the ancient scroll and resume your copying. When Osiris reached manhood, the text begins. He was crowned king of all Egypt, and Isis became his queen. Never had the land known such wise and benevolent rulers. Osiris taught the people how to cultivate grain, how to grow wheat and barley where before they had only gathered wild plants. He showed them how to tend vines and make wine, how to brew beer from bread, how to plow the dark soil left behind by the Nile's flood. You can see it in your mind's eye as you copy. The green and black god walking through golden fields, teaching farmers how to plant in straight rows, how to irrigate with canals and shadufs, how to store grain for the lean months. Before Osiris, the text implies, humans lived little better than animals, scrounging for food wherever they could find it. After him, civilization began to flourish. Isis too shared her wisdom with the people. The story continues. She taught women how to grind grain and bake bread, how to brew beer and weave linen. But more than this, she taught them the arts of healing, the herbs that cure fever and ease pain, the words of power that drive away evil spirits. Isis was the first physician, the first magician, the first to use knowledge in the service of compassion. You think of the healers who work in the temple complex, the physicians and herbalists who tend to the sick. They all trace their knowledge back to Isis, to this goddess who looked upon human suffering and decided to do something about it. It is a beautiful thought that the healing arts themselves are a divine gift. Together, Osiris and Isis ruled Egypt in a golden age of peace and prosperity. The Nile flooded reliably each year, the harvests were abundant, and the people were content. There was no war, no famine, no disease that could not be cured. It was, in short, as close to paradise as the mortal world has ever known. But there was one who did not share in this happiness. Set, lord of the desert and the storms, watched his brother's success with growing bitterness. Where Osiris was loved, Set was feared. Where Osiris brought life from the soil, Set ruled over the barren sands where nothing could grow. Where Osiris gathered people together in harmony, Set's very presence drove them apart in conflict and confusion. You pause in your copying, considering Set. He is not a simple villain, not in the Egyptian understanding. The desert is harsh and deadly, yes, but it also protects Egypt from invasion. Storms are destructive, but they also bring rain to regions that desperately need it. Set represents the chaos that exists alongside order, the necessary darkness that defines the light. And yet, in this story, his role is that of the jealous brother, the betrayer, the murderer. Even necessary forces can commit terrible acts. Set's jealousy festered in his heart like a wound that would not heal. The text continues. He could not bear to see Osiris praised and adored, while he himself was shunned and feared. And so he conceived a plan, a terrible plan, to rid himself of his brother forever. Set went to his craftsmen and ordered them to build a chest. But this was no ordinary chest. It was made of the finest cedar wood, imported at great expense from the mountains of Lebanon. It was inlaid with gold and precious stones, carved with intricate patterns that delighted the eye. It was, in short, the most beautiful chest ever created, fit for a king. But its true purpose was far more sinister. For Set had taken his brother's measurements in secret, and the chest was built to fit Osiris, and Osiris alone. You feel a chill run down your spine as you copy these words, even though you know the story well. There is something deeply unsettling about the image of Set carefully measuring his brother, planning his death with such cold precision. It is premeditated murder in its most calculating form. Set announced that he would hold a great feast. The text continues, inviting all the gods and many of the great nobles of Egypt. Osiris, ever trusting and good-natured, accepted his brother's invitation without suspicion. Isis, wiser and more cautious, felt a stirring of unease, but she could not pinpoint its source. She warned her husband to be careful, but Osiris only laughed and assured her that Set would never harm his own brother. The feast was magnificent. The finest foods and wines were served, the entertainment was dazzling, and Set played the role of gracious host to perfection. The guests marveled at the change in him, at how warm and welcoming he seemed. Perhaps, they whispered to each other, the desert god was finally learning to be civilized. At the height of the festivities, Set had the beautiful chest brought into the hall. The guests gasped at its magnificence. Set smiled and announced that he would give this treasure to whomever it fit perfectly. One by one, the guests tried to lie down inside the chest, but for each one it was too long or too short, too wide or too narrow. None could claim the prize. Then Set turned to Osiris. "Brother," he said, his voice smooth as honey, "will you not try? Who knows, perhaps it was made for you." Osiris, suspecting nothing, climbed into the chest. It fit him perfectly, as Set had known it would. The king smiled up at his brother, about to make some jest about the coincidence, and in that moment Set slammed the lid shut. Before Osiris could cry out, before he could use any of his divine power, Set's accomplices rushed forward. They nailed the lid down with iron nails. They sealed every crack with molten lead. Inside the chest, Osiris struggled and called out, but no sound could escape. No air could enter. Within minutes, the good king, the god of life and vegetation, was dead. "You have to stop writing." Your hand is trembling slightly, and you realize that tears are blurring your vision. You know this story. You have known it all your life. But reading it in this ancient hand, copying the words that some long-dead scribe set down centuries ago, makes it feel fresh and raw and unbearably real. You take a deep breath, wipe your eyes with the back of your hand, and continue. Set had his servants carry the sealed chest to the Nile and throw it into the river. The current caught it and carried it away northward toward the sea. Isis, returning to the feast, to find her husband gone and a terrible silence among the guests, knew at once that something was dreadfully wrong. When she learned what had happened, her scream of grief was heard in every corner of Egypt. The very sky seemed to darken with her sorrow. But Isis was not one to surrender to despair. Her love for Osiris was stronger than death itself. She cut off her beautiful hair as a sign of mourning. She tore her fine linen robes. She smeared her face with ash, and then she set out to find her husband's body. What follows is one of the great quest narratives of Egyptian mythology, and you copy it with growing admiration for the goddess's determination. For years, Isis searched. She wandered the length of Egypt, asking everyone she met if they had seen the chest. She followed the Nile to the sea, questioning fishermen and sailors. She traveled to foreign lands, never resting, never giving up hope. And at last, she heard a rumor that led her to the distant city of Byblos on the coast of what is now called Lebanon. The chest had washed ashore near Byblos, the rumor said, and a great tree had grown up around it, encasing it completely within its trunk. The tree had grown so large and beautiful that the king of Byblos had cut it down and used it as a pillar in his palace. Isis traveled to Byblos in disguise. She found work in the palace as a nursemaid to the queen's infant son. She cared for the child with divine tenderness, and each night she would place him in the fire of immortality to burn away his mortal parts, while she herself took the form of a swallow and flew around the pillar that contained her husband's body, singing songs of lamentation. One night, the queen came upon this scene and screamed in terror at seeing her son in the flames. Isis, startled, dropped her disguise and revealed herself in her true divine form. The queen fell to her knees, begging forgiveness for interrupting the goddess's work. Isis explained why she had come. She told the queen of Osiris's murder, of her long search, of the chest concealed within the palace pillar. The king of Byblos, moved by her story, ordered the pillar cut open at once, and there, still sealed within the cedar chest, lay the body of Osiris. Death had not diminished his beauty. He looked as if he were merely sleeping, waiting for his beloved wife to wake him. Isis brought the chest back to Egypt, to a secluded spot in the marshes of the delta where she could grieve in private and plan how to restore her husband to life. She was the greatest magician in existence, and she believed that even death could be overcome with sufficient knowledge and power. But Set was not finished with his evil. One night, while Isis slept exhausted beside the chest, Set was out hunting in the marshes. The red god loved to hunt by moonlight, chasing wild beasts through the reeds. By terrible chance he stumbled upon the hidden chest. When he opened it and saw Osiris lying there, still beautiful, still apparently capable of being restored to life, Set flew into a rage. He would not allow his brother to return. He would make certain that Osiris could never be reassembled, never be healed, never threaten his claim to the throne. Set tore Osiris's body into 14 pieces. Some say 16, some say 42, one for each district of Egypt. He scattered these pieces across the entire land, throwing some into the Nile, burying others in remote deserts, hiding them in caves and forests and swamps. When Isis awoke and found the chest empty, her grief multiplied beyond measure. But still she did not surrender. If she could not have her husband whole, she would gather him piece by piece. She would search every corner of Egypt until she had found them all. And so began another quest, longer and more difficult than the first. Isis searched the land with the help of her sister Nephthys, who had always loved Osiris and who wept almost as bitterly as Isis herself. They traveled the length of the Nile, from the delta to the cataracts. They crossed deserts and climbed mountains. They searched for years, and one by one, they found the pieces of Osiris's body, all except one. The most intimate part of Osiris had been thrown into the Nile and swallowed by a fish. It could never be recovered. But Isis, ever resourceful, fashioned a replacement from gold, and this allowed the body to be complete enough for what came next. For Isis was about to perform the first mummification. With her magic and her knowledge, she reassembled her husband's body. She bound the pieces together with linen wrappings. She spoke words of power over him, ancient spells that had never been uttered before, spells that called the soul back to its earthly home. And Osiris lived again. Not as he had lived before, not as a god who walked the earth and ruled over mortals. That life was over, but he lived as lord of the underworld, king of the dead, judge of souls. He had passed through death and emerged on the other side, and now he would guide others through that same passage. But before he descended to his new kingdom, Isis and Osiris shared one last night together, and from that union a child was conceived, a son who would grow up to avenge his father and reclaim the throne of Egypt. His name was Horus. You set down your pen as the afternoon light begins to fade. The story is not over, not by far. There is still the tale of Horus's upbringing in secret, his great battle with Set, the contest for the throne that would last 80 years. But you have reached a natural stopping point, a moment of pause before the next great act of the drama. You look down at the pages you have filled with your careful script. The legend of Osiris, preserved once more, ready to be passed down to another generation. It is a story of love and loss, of betrayal and perseverance, of death and resurrection. It is the story that explains why Egyptians mummify their dead, why they believe in an afterlife, why they hope for judgment and redemption. And it is, you realize, a story that speaks to something universal in the human heart. We all fear death. We all hope for something beyond it. We all want to believe that love is stronger than the grave. The temple bells ring for the evening meal, and you carefully put away your work. Tomorrow you will continue copying the tale of Horus and Set. But tonight, you need rest and food and time to absorb what you have already written. As you walk through the darkening corridors toward the dining hall, you find yourself thinking of Isis, her tireless searching, her refusal to give up. There is a lesson there, you think. When all seems lost, when hope itself seems dead, the heart that truly loves will keep searching, keep fighting, keep believing. It is a good lesson to carry into the night. The evening meal passes in quiet contemplation. You eat without really tasting the food, your mind still wrapped in the story of Osiris. The other scribes notice your distraction, but do not disturb you. They have all had days like this when a particular text takes hold of the imagination and refuses to let go. That night, you sleep poorly. Your dreams are filled with images from the legend, golden chests and weeping goddesses, and a body torn to pieces and scattered across the land. You wake before dawn, lying in the darkness of your small chamber thinking about death. It is not a morbid thought, not exactly. Death is a constant presence in Egyptian life, acknowledged and prepared for, rather than feared and avoided. From the moment of birth, every Egyptian begins preparing for death. Tombs are built, burial goods are accumulated, prayers are memorized. Death is not an ending but a transition, a doorway to another form of existence. But what happens after that doorway is crossed? You know the official teachings, of course. Every scribe learns them. But there is a difference between knowing something intellectually and truly understanding it in your heart. You rise early and make your way to the temple before the other scribes have stirred. But instead of going to the scriptorium, you find yourself walking toward a different part of the complex. A building set apart from the main temple, surrounded by its own wall and guarded by priests with serious expressions. This is the House of Beauty, though that gentle name conceals its true purpose. Here is where the dead are prepared for their journey to the afterlife. Here is where the sacred art of mummification is practiced. You do not know exactly why you have come here, only that the story you are copying has awakened questions that demand answers. You approach the entrance and are surprised to find that the guards do not turn you away. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, recognizes your blue sash. You are from the House of Life, he observes. What brings a scribe to our door so early? You hesitate, unsure how to explain. I am copying an ancient text, you finally say. The legend of Osiris. And I realize that I understand the story, but not what it means. Not truly. I thought perhaps if I saw what happens here, I might understand better. The god studies you for a long moment, then nods slowly. Understanding is always worth seeking. Go in, ask for old Senefer. He has worked here for 50 years. If anyone can help you understand, it is he. You thank him and pass through the gateway into a courtyard that smells of natron salt and strange resins. The buildings here are lower than the main temples, more practical in their design. You ask a passing worker for Senefer and are directed to a workshop at the far end of the compound. You find him there, a wizened man with hands stained permanent yellow from decades of handling embalming materials. He is bent over a workbench, carefully wrapping linen strips around something you cannot see clearly. When you clear your throat, he looks up with eyes that are surprisingly bright and alert. You explain why you have come, haltingly, unsure if you are making any sense. But Senefer listens patiently, nodding now and then, and when you finish, he sets aside his work and gestures for you to sit on a nearby stool. You want to understand what we do here, he says, his voice dry as papyrus. You want to know why we go to such lengths to preserve the dead. He pauses, gathering his thoughts. It all comes back to the story you are copying, young scribe. Isis invented mummification to preserve her husband's body so that his soul would have a home. What we do here is simply following her example. He gestures around the workshop. The body is not just flesh and bone to us. It is the vessel of the Ka, the life force that makes a person who they are. When someone dies, the Ka does not die with them. It continues to exist, but it needs a body to return to, a home where it can rest and receive offerings. If the body is destroyed, the Ka will wander homeless forever. That is why we preserve the dead. You nod, beginning to understand. So the mummification is not about the body itself, but about protecting the soul. Exactly. Senefer smiles, pleased at your comprehension. The body is a house. We are builders who make sure the house will last for eternity. The Ka can travel, can visit the land of the living, can enjoy the offerings left by family members, but it must always be able to return to its home. He stands and motions for you to follow him. Come, I will show you how we build these eternal homes. What follows is an education you will never forget. Senefer guides you through the various stages of mummification, explaining each step with the pride of a master craftsman. First, he explains, we wash the body with water from the Nile and palm wine. This purifies it, makes it ready for transformation. Then we remove the internal organs, for these would rot and destroy the body from within if left in place. He shows you the canopic jars, 4 sacred vessels designed to hold the removed organs. Each jar is protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus. Imseti, with his human head, guards the liver. Happy, with his baboon head, guards the lungs. Duamutef, with his jackal head, guards the stomach. Kebesinuef, with his falcon head, guards the intestines. But the heart, Senefer continues, the heart we leave in place. For the heart is the seat of intelligence and emotion. The heart is what the gods will weigh when the deceased stands before the throne of Osiris. This is what you came to learn about, you realize? This is the part of the story that matters most to ordinary people, the part that determines their eternal fate. Tell me about the weighing of the heart, you ask. What happens when someone dies? Senefer leads you to a wall covered with paintings, scenes from the Book of the Dead that decorate every embalming workshop. He points to the images as he speaks. When a person dies, their their individual personality and soul, leaves the body and begins a journey through the Duat, the underworld. It is a dangerous journey, filled with obstacles and enemies. The deceased must know the right words, the right spells to pass each challenge. That is why we place copies of the Book of the Dead in tombs, so the deceased will have guidance. You have copied portions of the Book of the Dead yourself. It is one of the most common texts in the House of Life, always in demand for tomb preparations. But the most important moment, Senefer continues, comes in the Hall of Two Truths. Here, the deceased stands before Osiris himself, seated on his throne as king of the underworld. 42 divine judges line the hall, each one representing a different law or moral principle. He points to the central scene of the painting, where a human figure stands before a great balance scale. The deceased must make the negative confession, declaring all the sins they have not committed. I have not murdered. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not caused pain, I have not been cruel. On and on, 42 denials of wrongdoing. And if they have committed these sins, you ask, then they must face the consequences. But first there is the weighing. Senefer traces his finger along the painting. See here. The jackal-headed god is Anubis, guide of souls, master of the embalming arts. It was Anubis who helped Isis mummify Osiris. And it is Anubis who tends the great scale. The painting shows Anubis carefully adjusting a large balance scale. On one side sits a human heart, on the other, a single feather. The feather belongs to Ma'at, Senefer explains. Ma'at is truth, justice, cosmic order, everything that is right and good. Her feather is the standard against which all hearts are measured. If the heart is light, unburdened by sin and evil, it will balance perfectly with the feather. If the heart is heavy with wrongdoing, it will sink. And if it sinks, you are almost afraid to ask. Senefer points to a fearsome creature crouching beneath the scale. It has the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, 3 of the most dangerous animals in Egypt combined into one nightmare form. Ammit, he says quietly, the devourer. If the heart fails the test, Ammit eats it, and without a heart the deceased ceases to exist. Not death which can be survived, but complete annihilation, an ending with no possibility of continuation. The image is truly terrifying. You stare at Ammit's hungry jaws and feel a cold shiver run through you. But most hearts pass the test, Senefer adds, his tone softening. Most people are not evil. Most people try to live according to Ma'at, to be good and honest and just. And for them, the weighing of the heart is not something to fear, but something to welcome. It is the moment when all their struggles and sacrifices are rewarded. He points to the final figure in the scene, a man with the head of an ibis, Thoth. Your patron god. He stands beside the scale recording the results on his scroll. When the heart balances true, Thoth writes the deceased's name in the book of the living dead, those who have passed through death and emerged worthy of eternal life. And then, what happens to those who pass? Senefer smiles and leads you to another section of the painting, showing a lush landscape of fields and rivers. Then they enter the field of reeds, paradise, a perfect version of Egypt, where the Nile always floods on time, where crops always grow tall, where there is no sickness, no suffering, no death. The deceased joins their ancestors, is reunited with loved ones who passed before, and lives forever in peace and plenty. He pauses, looking at you with those bright, knowing eyes. This is what we work for here in the House of Beauty, not just preserving bodies, but helping souls reach that blessed place. Every strip of linen we wrap, every prayer we recite, brings the deceased one step closer to the field of reeds. You stand in silence for a long moment, absorbing everything you have learned. The system makes a profound kind of sense. Preserve the bodies so the car has a home. Prepare the deceased with the right spells and prayers. Trust in the judgment of Osiris and the fairness of the scale. Live a good life, and eternal paradise awaits. Thank you, you finally say. I understand now, or at least I understand better than I did before. Senefer nods. Understanding grows over a lifetime, young scribe. Keep copying those old stories. Each time you write them, you will understand a little more. He returns to his workbench and picks up his linen strips. Now go. You have work to do, and so do I. The dead are patient, but they are also waiting. You leave the House of Beauty and walk slowly back toward the scriptorium. The sun has risen fully now, and the temple complex is bustling with activity. But you feel strangely detached from it all, your mind still dwelling in the underworld in the Hall of Two Truths. Tonight, when you sleep, you will dream of scales and feathers. You will dream of Anubis with his kind, canine face, guiding souls through the darkness. You will dream of Thoth recording names in his endless scroll, and you will dream of the field of reeds, green and golden and eternal, waiting for all who live their lives with truth in their hearts. But first there is work to do. The legend of Osiris is not yet complete. There is still the tale of Horus, the rightful heir, and his long battle against Set. There is still the story of how justice was finally served and order restored to the world. You settle onto your cushion in the scriptorium, unroll the ancient scroll, and dip your pen in ink. The story continues, and you are its keeper. The day passes swiftly when you are absorbed in sacred work. You copy more of the Osiris legend, your pen moving steadily across the papyrus, but your mind keeps wandering to what you learned in the House of Beauty. The weighing of the heart, the field of reeds, the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. These concepts have always been part of your understanding, as natural as breathing, but now they feel more real, more immediate. By late afternoon, your eyes are tired, and your hand cramps from holding the pen. You set aside your work and decide to attend the evening ceremonies. The temple of Karnak is dedicated primarily to Amun-Ra, king of the gods, and sunset brings one of the most important daily rituals, the honoring of Ra, as he begins his nightly journey through the underworld. You make your way through the temple complex toward the great courtyard where the ceremony will be held. The slanting afternoon light paints everything in shades of amber and gold, and the massive columns cast long shadows across the paving stones. Other worshippers are gathering as well, priests in their white robes, temple servants, ordinary citizens who have come to pay their respects to the dying sun. The ceremony begins as the sun touches the western horizon. A high priest emerges from the inner sanctuary carrying a golden disc that represents Ra. He raises it high so that it catches the last rays of sunlight, and the gathered crowd falls silent. "Homage to you, Ra," the priest intones, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Lord of heaven, creator of all things, you have crossed the sky this day, bringing light and life to the world. Now you descend into the west, into the mouth of Nut, to begin your journey through the darkness. You watch the sun sink lower, a great ball of fire slowly disappearing behind the distant cliffs. The Egyptians have observed this phenomenon every evening for thousands of years, and they have developed elaborate explanations for where the sun goes when it vanishes from sight. The truth as the priests teach it, is both beautiful and terrifying. Ra does not simply disappear at night. He embarks on a journey through the underworld, sailing on his celestial boat through 12 regions of darkness, each one corresponding to an hour of the night. And this journey is not peaceful. It is a battle, a nightly struggle against the forces of chaos that threaten to prevent the sun from rising again. After the ceremony concludes, you linger in the courtyard, watching the sky fade from gold to orange to deep purple. An elderly priest notices you standing alone and approaches with a gentle smile. He is Amenhotep, one of the astronomers who spend their nights on the temple roof, mapping the stars and tracking the movements of the heavenly bodies. "You look troubled, young scribe," he observes, "or perhaps merely thoughtful. I was thinking about Ra's journey, you admit, about what happens to the sun each night. We speak of it so casually, but when I truly consider it, it seems remarkable. The sun dying and being reborn every single day." Amenhotep nods, his aged face creasing with approval. "You have touched upon one of the great mysteries. Come walk with me. The night is beautiful, and I can tell you are hungry for knowledge." You fall into step beside him as he leads you away from the main courtyard, through a series of smaller passages, and up a narrow staircase that winds around the outside of one of the pylons. You emerge onto a flat rooftop high above the temple complex, with a breathtaking view of the sky in all directions. The stars are just beginning to appear, faint points of light scattered across the darkening vault of heaven. Amenhotep settles onto a stone bench and gestures for you to join him. "What do you know of Ra's nightly journey?" he asks. You recite what you have learned. Ra enters the underworld through the western horizon. He sails through 12 caverns, one for each hour of the night. He faces many dangers, but emerges victorious in the east at dawn. Amenhotep nods. "The basics, yes, but let me tell you more." He points toward the western horizon, where the last traces of sunset still glow. When Ra enters the Duat, the underworld, he does not travel alone. His boat carries a crew of divine beings, gods and goddesses, who help him navigate the darkness. Thoth is there, with his wisdom and magic. Horus is there, with his fierce strength. Ma'at is there, ensuring that order is maintained even in the realm of chaos. The first hour of the night is relatively peaceful. Ra sails through a region called the Western Desert, where the recently dead gather to greet him. Imagine it, young scribe, every soul that died that day, waiting on the banks of the underworld river, hoping for a glimpse of the sun god as he passes. For many of them, it is the last light they will see before their journey to the Hall of Two Truths. You think of what Senefer told you earlier about the deceased traveling through the Duat. It makes sense now that their journey would parallel Ra's, that they would encounter the same regions and the same dangers. But as the hours pass, Amenhotep continues. The journey grows more perilous. The 4th and 5th hours take Ra through the kingdom of Sokar, a hawk-headed god of the deep earth. Here the passageway grows narrow and dark, winding through caverns that seem to squeeze the very light from existence. Ra's boat must transform into a serpent to pass through, sliding along on its belly through the crushing darkness. You shiver despite the warm evening air. The image is vivid and unsettling. But the greatest danger comes in the 7th hour. Amenhotep's voice drops to barely above a whisper. For this is where Apophis waits. You have heard this name before, always spoken with a mixture of fear and disgust. Apophis, the great serpent of chaos, the enemy of all existence. Apophis is not like Set, Amenhotep explains. Set is chaos, yes, but he is chaos that can be channeled, chaos that serves a purpose. Apophis is pure destruction. He wants nothing less than to devour the sun, to end the cycle of day and night forever, to return the universe to the primordial darkness from which it emerged. Every night, Apophis attacks. He is vast beyond measure, his coils stretching for miles through the underworld. His eyes burn with hatred for Ra and everything Ra represents. He rises from the dark waters and wraps himself around the sun boat, trying to drag it down into oblivion. And every night, Amenhotep says, his voice rising, the gods fight back. Set himself, despite all his crimes against Osiris, stands at the prow of the boat with his spear, driving it into Apophis's scaly hide. For Set understands that if Apophis wins, there will be no world left for him to rule, no storms to command, no desert to call his own. Even chaos has something to lose when faced with utter annihilation. The battle is fierce and terrible. Apophis is wounded, driven back. His coils loosen from the boat, but he cannot be killed. He is a primordial force, as eternal as Ra himself. Each night he attacks, and each night he is defeated, and each night he retreats to heal his wounds and prepare for the next assault. You sit in silence, absorbing this. The nightly journey of Ra is not just a story about where the sun goes. It is a cosmic drama, a battle between existence and oblivion that plays out every single night while humans sleep unaware. By the 8th hour, Amenhotep continues. The worst is over. Ra sails through regions of fire and water, through caverns filled with blessed souls and tortured sinners. In the 11th hour, his boat approaches the eastern horizon, and the gods begin to prepare for the miracle of dawn. The 12th hour is the hour of rebirth. Ra approaches the body of Osiris, who waits in the deepest part of the underworld. The living sun and the dead king meet, and in their union something miraculous occurs. Ra is renewed, his energy restored for another day, and Osiris is renewed as well, his connection to the world of the living reaffirmed through the sun that will soon shine upon his worshippers. And then Ra emerges from the eastern horizon, reborn as the morning sun. Amenhotep gestures toward the eastern sky, still dark, but with the faintest hint of anticipation, as though the horizon itself knows what is coming. This is why we worship Ra, the old priest says, not because he is powerful, though he is, not because he is ancient, though he is, but because every single day he demonstrates the fundamental truth of existence. Death is not the end. Darkness does not last forever. No matter how terrible the night, the sun will rise again. You sit on the rooftop for a long time after Amenhotep leaves, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. You find the constellation of Osiris, the great hunter, and the stars of Isis and Nephthys that follow him across the sky. You watch Nut's body arch overhead, studded with countless points of light, and you think about how the sky goddess swallows the sun each evening and gives birth to it each morning. There is comfort in these stories, you realize. Not false comfort, not denial of the darkness, but genuine consolation. Yes, there is chaos in the universe. Yes, there are forces that want to destroy everything good and beautiful. But there are also forces that fight back, gods who will not surrender, cycles that cannot be broken. Every morning the sun rises. Every spring the Nile floods. Every soul that lives according to Ma'at will find eternal life in the field of reeds. These are not just beliefs. They are the fundamental laws of the universe, as certain as the ground beneath your feet and the stars above your head. Eventually you rise from the bench and make your way back down the narrow staircase. The temple complex is quiet now, most people asleep in their beds, but the priests are still awake, still performing the hourly rituals that help Ra on his journey, still fighting the eternal battle against the serpent of chaos. You return to your small chamber, lie down on your reed mat and close your eyes. Tomorrow you will continue copying the legend of Osiris. You will write about Horus and Set, about justice and revenge, about the restoration of order after terrible upheaval. But tonight, as you drift towards sleep, your thoughts are with Ra. You imagine his golden boat sailing through darkness, his crew of gods standing ready for battle. The great serpent Apophis coiling in the shadows ahead. You imagine Set at the prow, spear raised, ready to defend the very existence he so often threatens. And you smile in the darkness, because you know how the story ends. The same way it ends every night. The same way it will end tonight and tomorrow night and every night until the end of time. The sun will rise, the darkness will be defeated, life will go on. With that comforting certainty wrapped around you like a warm blanket, you surrender to sleep. Your dreams filled with stars and serpents and the eternal golden light of Ra. Morning arrives with the familiar sound of temple bells, and you wake feeling strangely refreshed despite your late night on the rooftop. Your dreams were peaceful, filled with golden light and the sense of cosmic order that comes from understanding your place in the great pattern of existence. After your morning rituals and a simple breakfast of bread and figs, you return to the scriptorium with renewed energy. The ancient scroll awaits you, and today you will copy the portion of the legend that many consider the most exciting, the great contest between Horus and Set for the throne of Egypt. You settle onto your cushion, unroll the scroll to where you left off, and begin to read. The story picks up after Isis has raised her son Horus in secret, hiding him in the marshes of the delta to protect him from Set's wrath. When Horus reached manhood, the text begins. He was strong and beautiful, with the fierce eyes of a falcon and the bearing of a king. Isis had told him the story of his father's murder, had described Set's treachery in every detail, and Horus burned with the desire for justice. He emerged from hiding and presented himself before the tribunal of the gods, demanding that his father's throne be restored to him. You can imagine the scene, the young god striding into the celestial court, his falcon head held high, his voice ringing with righteous anger. Set had ruled Egypt for years by then, and his reign had been harsh. The red god cared nothing for the welfare of mortals. He ruled through fear and force, and the land suffered under his dominion. But Set was not about to surrender his power without a fight. When Horus made his claim, Set rose from his seat and bellowed his defiance. "The throne is mine by right of conquest," he roared. "I took it with my own hands, and I will not give it up to this child, this whelp raised in the swamps by a widow and a gaggle of scorpions." The gods were divided. Some supported Horus, believing that the throne should pass from father to son according to ancient tradition. Others supported Set, arguing that strength and cunning were valid ways to claim power. Ra himself, the king of the gods, seemed uncertain. He had no love for Set, but he also had concerns about placing such a young and untested god on the throne of Egypt. And so began the great contest, a series of challenges and trials that would last for 80 years. You pause in your copying, marveling at this detail. 80 years of conflict between uncle and nephew, 80 years of tests and battles and divine maneuvering. It speaks to the Egyptian understanding that justice does not come quickly or easily, that the struggle between order and chaos is ongoing and eternal. The first challenge was a battle in the form of hippopotamuses. The text continues. Both Horus and Set transformed themselves into these mighty beasts and plunged into the Nile, each trying to stay submerged longer than the other. They remained underwater for 3 months, neither willing to surrender. Isis watched from the shore, her heart torn between her son and her brother. For despite everything Set had done, he was still her kin, still the child of her mother Nut. She could not bring herself to wish him dead. Finally, unable to bear the suspense any longer, Isis fashioned a copper harpoon and threw it into the water. It struck Horus by mistake, and he cried out in pain, "Mother, why do you attack me? I am your son." Isis quickly used her magic to call the harpoon back, then threw it again. This time, it struck Set, and he too cried out, "Sister, why do you attack me? We share the same mother's blood." And Isis, her heart softening at his plea, called the harpoon back again, releasing him from its barbs. Horus was furious at this show of mercy. He emerged from the river in a rage and, in his anger, cut off his mother's head. You stop writing shocked, even though you know this story. The violence between family members, even divine family members, is difficult to process, but you continue reading, and the next part provides some comfort. Thoth, ever the healer and restorer, replaced Isis's head with that of a cow, giving her a new form and new life. Isis forgave her son, understanding that his anger came from a place of deep pain. And the contest continued. The trials went on and on. The text relates. Set and Horus raced in boats made of stone, but Horus secretly built his from wood painted to look like stone, while Set's genuine stone vessel sank to the bottom. They competed in feats of strength and endurance. They battled with weapons and with magic. Each time, neither could achieve a decisive victory over the other. One of the most famous incidents involved Set's attempt to humiliate Horus through trickery. Set invited Horus to a feast, and during the night attempted to violate him in a way that would prove his dominance. But Horus was warned by his mother and caught Set's essence in his hands. Isis, ever clever, then helped Horus turn the tables, using Set's own scheme against him. When the gods examined both competitors for evidence of who had dominated whom, they found that Horus was pure while Set bore the mark of submission. Set was humiliated before the entire divine tribunal, but still he would not concede defeat. The battle between them was not always so subtle. At one point, they fought in earnest, each trying to kill the other. In this battle, Set tore out Horus's left eye, ripping it from his face and tearing it into 6 pieces, which he scattered across Egypt. You know this part of the story well, for the Eye of Horus is one of the most important symbols in Egyptian religion. You wear a small amulet of it around your neck, a gift from your mother to protect you from harm. Thoth, once again playing the role of healer, searched for the pieces of Horus's eye. He found them all and reassembled them, restoring the eye to wholeness. But something had changed in the restoration. The eye was now more than just an eye. It had become the Wedjat, the eye of wholeness and healing, a symbol of restoration and the triumph over injury. Horus, in turn, wounded Set grievously, tearing away his testicles and leaving him diminished. Both gods bore the scars of their conflict, permanent reminders of the price of their struggle. The contest seemed like it would never end. The gods grew weary of the constant fighting, the endless arguments, the disruption to cosmic order. Ra himself began to lose patience, but he could not bring himself to make a final judgment. It was then that the gods decided to write a letter to Osiris himself, Lord of the Underworld, asking for his opinion on who should rule. Osiris's response was sharp and clear. "Why do you wrong my son?" he wrote. "Have you forgotten that it was I who gave you grain to eat? Before me, the gods knew only hunger. I created the barley and the wheat that sustain both mortals and immortals, and this is how you repay me, by denying my son his rightful throne?" But the letter contained more than an appeal to gratitude. It contained a threat as well. Osiris reminded the gods that he ruled the underworld, the place where all souls eventually come. The stars themselves descend into his realm when they set in the west. No one, not even the greatest god, can escape death forever. "Do you wish to face me?" he wrote, "knowing that you denied justice to my son?" This, at last, swayed the tribunal. Even Ra could not ignore the Lord of the Dead. And so, after 80 years of contest, the verdict was finally rendered. Horus was declared the rightful king of Egypt. The throne that Osiris had held, the throne that Set had stolen, was restored to its proper heir. Set was not destroyed, for even the gods recognized that chaos served a purpose. Instead, he was banished to the desert, made lord of storms and foreigners and all the wild places beyond civilization's reach. He would never again threaten the throne, but he would continue to exist, a necessary counterbalance to the order that Horus represented. You set down your pen and flex your aching fingers. The story is complete, at least this portion of it. Justice has been served, order has been restored, and the rightful king sits upon his throne. But as you reread what you have written, you find yourself thinking about the complexity of the tale. Set is the villain, certainly. He murdered his brother, he tried to kill his nephew, he ruled Egypt with cruelty and fear. And yet the gods did not destroy him. They recognized that even chaos has its place in the cosmic order. And Horus, the hero, is not without fault. He attacked his own mother in a moment of rage. He fought dirty when he had to. He endured humiliation and injury and 80 years of struggle before finally achieving his goal. This is not a simple story of good versus evil, you realize. It is a story about the messiness of existence, about how order and chaos are locked in eternal struggle, about how justice requires patience and perseverance and sometimes compromise. The hero does not always win cleanly. The villain is not always completely defeated, but in the end, Ma'at prevails. In the end, things are set right. In the end, the son avenges his father and takes his rightful place. That is the promise Egypt makes to its people. No matter how dark things seem, no matter how powerful the forces of chaos appear to be, order will eventually triumph. The throne will be restored. The crops will grow. The sun will rise. You carefully roll up your completed pages and set them aside to dry. Tomorrow you will continue with another section of Egyptian mythology. But for today, the story of Horus and Set is complete. A young apprentice priest appears at the entrance to the scriptorium, hesitating until you notice him. He is perhaps 12 years old, with the shaved head of a novice and wide, curious eyes. "Excuse me," he says softly. "I was told that you are copying the old legends. I wondered if I might ask you a question." You smile and gesture for him to approach. "What would you like to know?" "The Eye of Horus," he says, touching an amulet at his own neck. "I wear this for protection, but I never knew why it was powerful. Now, I have heard that you know the story." You consider the boy for a moment, then nod. The Eye of Horus is powerful because it was broken and then made whole again. It represents healing from injury, restoration after loss. When you wear it, you carry with you the promise that whatever is damaged can be repaired, whatever is scattered can be gathered, whatever is lost can be found. The boy's eyes widen with understanding. So it is not just protection, it is hope. Exactly, it is hope. The apprentice bows his thanks and hurries away, no doubt eager to share what he has learned with his fellows. You watch him go with a feeling of quiet satisfaction. This is why the legends matter. This is why you spend your days copying ancient texts in a dim scriptorium, not just to preserve words on papyrus, but to pass on meaning, to give the next generation the stories that will help them make sense of their world. Outside, the sun is beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Soon Ra will begin another journey through the underworld, another battle against the serpent of chaos, another miraculous rebirth at dawn. And tomorrow, you will continue your own journey through the legends of ancient Egypt. Several days have passed since you completed the great legend of Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Maria was pleased with your work, praising the clarity of your script and the care you took with the ancient text. The completed copy has been added to the permanent archive where it will endure for generations to come. Today is a rest day, one of the regular breaks from labor that the temple calendar provides. Even sacred work cannot continue without pause, and the priests understand that minds and bodies need time to recover. Most of your fellow scribes have scattered to various pursuits, visiting family in the village, shopping in the markets, or simply sleeping late in their chambers. You have chosen to spend your rest day at the sacred lake. The lake lies at the heart of the temple complex, a great rectangular pool of water that mirrors the sky and the surrounding buildings. It was dug centuries ago to represent the primordial waters of Nun, the chaos from which all creation emerged. Priests bathe here before performing sacred rituals. Offerings are sometimes cast into its depths. And on quiet afternoons like this one, it serves as a place of peaceful reflection. You have brought a small basket containing bread, cheese, and a handful of dates, along with a clay jar of beer to wash it down. You settle onto the stone steps that lead down to the water's edge, letting your feet dangle just above the surface. The afternoon sun is warm but not oppressive, and a gentle breeze carries the scent of lotus blossoms across the water. Fish move lazily beneath the surface, dark shapes gliding through the green depths. These are sacred fish never caught or eaten. Some say they are the descendants of the fish that swallowed part of Osiris's body. Others say they are the embodiment of minor gods who chose this form to be close to the temple. Whatever the truth, they seem content in their home, rising occasionally to snap at insects or simply to bask in the sunlight. You are finishing your simple meal when you hear footsteps approaching. You turn to see one of the elder priests making his way down the steps, moving carefully with a wooden staff to support his aged limbs. This is Pasa, a priest who has served in the temple for longer than most people have been alive. His face is a map of wrinkles, his eyes clouded with cataracts, but his mind remains sharp, and his memory is legendary. "May I join you, young scribe?" he asks, his voice thin but warm. "Of course, honored one." You shift aside to make room, and Pasa settles onto the step with a sigh of relief. "My old bones appreciate any opportunity to rest," he says with a smile. "And this is one of my favorite spots in all the complex. The water, the light, the fish going about their eternal business. It reminds me that some things never change, even as everything else does." You sit in companionable silence for a while, watching the fish and listening to the gentle lap of water against stone. Then Pasa speaks again. "I hear you have been copying the legend of Osiris. An important work. The old versions are always the truest." "It was an honor," you reply. "The story moved me more deeply than I expected." Pasa nods slowly. "The great legends always do. They speak to something within us that mere words cannot reach." He pauses, gazing out across the water. "Do you know the tale of the shipwrecked sailor? You have heard of it, but never read the full text. It is not one of the religious legends, but a story of adventure and wonder, the kind of tale that sailors and travelers share in taverns and around campfires. I know it only by reputation, you admit. Then let me tell it to you. Pace's clouded eyes seemed to brighten with memory. I learned it from my own teacher, who learned it from his, and so on back through the generations. It is not a sacred text exactly, but it contains truths that the sacred texts sometimes miss. He settles more comfortably on the stone step and begins. There was once a sailor, Passer recounts, who served on a ship bound for the Pharaohs' mines in the south. He was an experienced seaman, trusted by his captain, skilled in reading the winds and the currents. The ship was large, 150 cubits long, carrying a crew of 150 men, each one a veteran of many voyages. You can see it in your mind's eye, the great wooden ship with its single sail, cutting through the blue waters of the Red Sea. You have never been to sea yourself, but you have heard tales from those who have, and you can imagine the roll of the deck, the snap of the sail, the endless expanse of water stretching to every horizon. The voyage began well, Passer continues. Fair winds and calm seas, the ship making good time toward its destination. But on the third day the weather changed. A storm rose up from nowhere, waves as tall as temples, winds that screamed like tortured souls. The ship was tossed about like a toy, and before anyone could react, it struck a hidden reef and broke apart. The sailor was thrown into the churning water. Around him, his crewmates struggled and cried out, but one by one, they disappeared beneath the waves. He alone survived, clinging to a piece of wreckage, tossed this way and that by the merciless sea. For 3 days, he drifted more dead than alive. He had no food, no fresh water, no shelter from the burning sun or the cold nights. He prayed to every god he knew, begging for deliverance, promising offerings and devotion if only he might live. Passer pauses, letting the tension build. You find yourself leaning forward, eager to hear what happens next. On the 4th day, he washed ashore on an island. It was like no place he had ever seen. The trees were heavy with fruit. Fresh water streams flowed everywhere. Birds sang in the branches, and the air was sweet with the smell of flowers. It seemed like paradise, a gift from the gods in answer to his prayers. The sailor gathered fruit and caught fish, and built himself a small shelter from palm fronds. For several days he lived alone on the island, recovering his strength and thanking the gods for his survival. He thought perhaps he would be stuck there forever, but at least it was a beautiful prison. Then, one day, he heard a sound like thunder. The ground shook, the trees trembled, and from the interior of the island came a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a serpent, but vast beyond imagining. 30 cubits long, its body covered in scales of gold. Its beard was lapis lazuli, a brilliant blue that shimmered in the sunlight. When it spoke, its voice was like the rumble of distant storms. The sailor fell to his knees, terrified. He was certain he was about to die, that this magnificent beast would devour him where he knelt. But the serpent did not attack. Instead, it asked a simple question. "What brings you to my island, little mortal?" And the sailor, trembling with fear, told his story. The voyage, the storm, the shipwreck, his desperate survival. He held nothing back, for what good would lies do him in the presence of such a being? Passa's voice has taken on a rhythmic quality, the cadence of a born storyteller. You find yourself utterly absorbed. The serpent listened in silence. And when the sailor finished, the great creature did something unexpected. It wept. You, it said, are not the only one to know loss. Once I lived on this island with my family, 75 serpents in all, my brothers and sisters and children. We were happy here, content in our paradise. But one night, a star fell from the sky, a great ball of fire that struck the island and destroyed everything. I alone survived, for I was away hunting when it fell. I returned to find nothing but ashes and memory. The sailor felt his fear transform into compassion. He saw that this magnificent creature was not a monster, but a survivor, like himself. They were kindred spirits, both left alone by tragedy, both carrying the weight of grief. The serpent allowed the sailor to remain on the island, teaching him where to find the best fruit, which streams had the sweetest water, how to read the stars and the weather. Months passed, and a strange friendship grew between them. Finally, the day came when a ship appeared on the horizon. The serpent knew before the sailor did. Your rescue has arrived, it said. You will return to your home, to your family, to your life among your people. The sailor was overcome with gratitude. He promised to send gifts, treasures from Egypt, incense and fine oils, and all manner of precious things. But the serpent only smiled. What need have I of incense? I am the Lord of Punt, the land of perfumes. This island produces all that I could ever desire. No, little sailor, when you leave this place, you will not return. The island will vanish beneath the waves, becoming nothing more than a memory and a story. The serpent gave the sailor gifts instead, ivory and incense, myrrh and rare woods, enough treasure to make him wealthy for the rest of his life. And when the ship landed and the crew came ashore, they marveled at the riches and at the sailor's tale. As the ship sailed away, the sailor looked back at the island, and just as the serpent had foretold, it slowly sank beneath the waves until nothing remained but empty sea and sky. Pacer falls silent. The sacred lake is still before you, the fish still gliding through their eternal patterns. The sun has moved lower in the sky while you listened. What does it mean, you ask softly. Pacer considers the question. It means many things to many people. To some it is a tale of survival, of how even the worst disasters can be overcome if we hold on to hope. To others, it is about the unexpected kindnesses we find in strange places, the connections that form between beings who seem to have nothing in common. He gazes out across the water, but to me, it is about loss and how we bear it. The serpent lost everything he loved, yet he went on living. He found a way to help a stranger, to share wisdom and kindness despite his grief. And the sailor who thought he had lost everything discovered that loss can lead to unexpected treasures. You think about Osiris torn to pieces and yet becoming king of the underworld. You think about Isis searching for years through grief and never giving up. You think about Ra dying every night and being reborn every morning. The theme of loss transformed into something new, runs through all the Egyptian stories. There is wisdom in these old tales, Paza says, as if reading your thoughts, not just in the grand legends of gods and heroes, but in the smaller stories too. The shipwrecked sailor never performed any great deed. He simply survived, and in surviving learned something about the nature of existence. He rises slowly, leaning on his staff. I have taken enough of your rest day, young scribe. But remember this tale. Someday, when the storms of life cast you upon unexpected shores, you may find that the island holds treasures you never imagined. You thank him for the story and watch as he makes his way back up the steps and into the temple complex. Then you sit alone by the sacred lake, watching the fish and thinking about serpents and sailors and the strange paths that life takes. The sun continues its descent toward the west. Soon Ra will begin his nightly journey, his battle against the serpent of chaos. And tomorrow, you will return to the scriptorium to continue the endless work of preserving the stories that give meaning to existence. But for now, you are content to sit here in the golden light of afternoon, thinking about islands that vanish and gifts that remain, and the unexpected kindnesses that make life bearable. The sacred fish rise to the surface, and for a moment, their scales catch the light like gold, like the scales of a great serpent, lord of a magical island, keeper of wisdom, survivor of unimaginable loss. You smile and toss them the last crumbs of your bread. The days have settled into a comfortable rhythm. You wake with the bells, wash with natron water, eat your simple breakfast, and make your way to the scriptorium where the ancient texts wait like old friends. You have copied hymns and prayers, medical treatises and astronomical observations, letters from pharaohs long dead, and inventories of temple offerings. Each text teaches you something new, not just about Egypt, but about the endless human need to record, to preserve, to remember. Tonight, however, something unusual is about to happen. You are finishing your evening meal in the dining hall when a young acolyte approaches your table. He bows nervously and delivers his message in a whisper that nonetheless carries clearly in the quiet room. Mariah wishes to see you in his private study. At once, if you please. You feel a flutter of anxiety. Summons to the head priest's private chambers are rare, usually reserved for matters of great importance or, occasionally, for reprimands. You search your memory for anything you might have done wrong, any error in your copying, any breach of temple protocol. Nothing comes to mind, but that does not entirely ease your worry. You follow the acolyte through corridors that grow progressively older and more worn as you move deeper into the temple complex. Maria's study is located in one of the most ancient parts of the House of Life, a section that dates back to the earliest days of Karnak. The walls here are thick and cool, the hieroglyphs carved in styles that predate the current dynasty by centuries. The acolyte stops before a heavy wooden door and knocks twice. A dry voice from within bids you enter. Maria's study is smaller than you expected, barely larger than your own chamber, but every available surface is covered with scrolls, tablets, and strange artifacts. Oil lamps cast pools of warm light across the cluttered space. The old priest sits behind a desk piled high with documents, his bald head gleaming in the lamplight. Ah, Ka. He gestures to a cushion on the floor before the desk. Sit. We have much to discuss. You settle onto the cushion, trying to appear calm despite your nerves. Marihir studies you for a long moment, his ancient eyes seeming to peer into your very soul. You have been with us for 5 years now, he says finally. In that time, you have proven yourself dedicated, careful, and trustworthy. Your work on the Osiris legend was exemplary. I have received nothing but praise from the senior scribes who reviewed your copy. Thank you, honored one. The relief that floods through you is almost physical. But Mariah holds up a hand. I did not summon you merely to offer compliments. I have a question for you, young scribe. What do you know of the Book of Thoth? The question catches you off guard. The Book of Thoth is legendary, whispered about in scribal circles but rarely discussed openly. You know the basics, of course. Everyone does. It is said to be a book of supreme magical power. You answer carefully. Written by Thoth himself, containing all the secrets of the universe, spells that can command the sky and the earth, the underworld and the waters, knowledge that no mortal was meant to possess. Mariah nods slowly. And what else? You hesitate. There are stories, tales of those who sought the book and paid terrible prices, curses and madness and death. Most scholars believe the book is merely a legend, a cautionary tale about the dangers of seeking forbidden knowledge. Most scholars. Maria's lips curve into a thin smile. And what do you believe? You consider the question seriously. I believe that all legends contain some truth. Whether there is an actual physical book, I cannot say. But the idea represents that some knowledge is too dangerous for mortals, that wisdom must be tempered with humility. That seems true to me. Mariah's smile broadens. A wise answer. He rises from his desk and moves to a portion of the wall that appears, at first glance, to be solid stone. But when he presses certain hieroglyphs in sequence, a hidden door swings open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Come, he says. There is something I wish to show you. You follow him through the secret passage, your heart beating faster with each step. The corridor is lit by phosphorescent stones set into the walls, casting an eerie blue-green glow that makes the shadows dance. The air grows cooler and drier, and you realize you are descending, moving deeper beneath the temple than you ever knew existed. At last, the passage opens into a chamber that takes your breath away. It is a library, but unlike any library you have ever seen. The walls are lined with niches, and in each niche rests a scroll or tablet or bound sheaf of papyrus. There must be hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, each one carefully preserved in the secret vault beneath the earth. Welcome to the hidden archive, Mariah says softly. Only the senior priests know of this place. The texts stored here are too dangerous for general access, too powerful or too controversial, or too sacred to be left in the main library. where anyone might stumble upon them. You walk slowly along the walls, reading the labels on the niches, books of powerful magic, records of secret rituals, prophecies, forbidden histories. Your eyes catch titles that make your breath catch. The Lamentations of Isis, the Dreams of the Sleeping God, the Chronicle of the Aten Heresy. And here, Marius stops before a niche that stands apart from the others, set into an alcove that is itself guarded by carved serpents and protective amulets. This is what I wanted you to see. In the niche rests a scroll case of extraordinary beauty. It is made of gold and lapis lazuli, inscribed with hieroglyphs so ancient and strange that you cannot read them. The case seems to glow with its own inner light, and you feel a strange pull toward it, a desire to reach out and touch it that you have to consciously resist. Is that, you whisper, unable to finish the question, the Book of Thoth? Marius shakes his head. No, the true Book of Thoth, if it ever existed, was never found. But this is the next best thing. It is the tale of Prince Setna, a story about a man who sought the Book of Thoth and learned the terrible cost of forbidden knowledge. He carefully removes the scroll case from its niche and carries it to a reading table in the center of the chamber. With reverent hands, he opens the case and withdraws the scroll within. This tale is not for general circulation, he explains, as he unrolls the papyrus. It is too disturbing, too likely to be misunderstood. But I believe you are ready to hear it, and I believe you will understand why it must be preserved, even if it can never be shared freely. He begins to read, and you listen with growing fascination and horror. Prince Setna was a son of Pharaoh Rameses the Great, Maria recites. He was brilliant and ambitious, devoted to the study of ancient texts and magical arts. He spent his days in the temples and libraries seeking ever greater knowledge, ever more powerful spells. One day, while exploring an ancient tomb, Setna discovered a reference to the Book of Thoth. According to the inscription, the book had been buried with a long-dead prince named Naneferkaptah, hidden in his tomb somewhere in the necropolis of Memphis. Setna became obsessed. He had to find that book. He had to possess its secrets. Despite warnings from priests and scholars, despite his own father's concerns, he would not rest until he had located the tomb. And find it he did. Deep beneath the sands of Memphis, in a vault that had remained sealed for centuries, Setna discovered the mummy of Naneferkaptah, still seated on his throne, still clutching the Book of Thoth in his withered hands. But Naneferkaptah was not entirely dead. His spirit remained bound to his body, guarding the book that had cost him everything. When Setna entered the tomb, the ghost rose to confront him. Maria's voice drops lower, taking on an eerie quality that makes the shadows seem to press closer. Do not take this book, the ghost warned. It will destroy you as it destroyed me. Let me tell you my story so that you understand the price of forbidden knowledge. And Naneferkaptah told his tale, how he too had sought the Book of Thoth, how he had found it at the bottom of the sea, guarded by serpents and scorpions and an immortal serpent that could not be killed, how he had defeated the guardians and claimed the book, reading its spells and gaining power beyond imagination. But Thoth himself was watching. The God of wisdom does not permit his secrets to be stolen without consequence. A curse fell upon Naneferkaptah and all his family. His son died first drowned in the Nile, then his wife, taking her own life in despair. And finally, Naneferkaptah himself, his boat overturned by the angry god, the book clutched to his chest as he sank beneath the waters. The book was found and buried with me, the ghost concluded. I have guarded it ever since, bound to this tomb for eternity, unable to pass on to the field of reeds because I dared to possess what was not meant for mortals. Do not make my mistake, leave the book and go. Meria pauses in his reading, fixing you with a solemn gaze, but Setna did not listen. He was too proud, too certain of his own abilities. He played a game of senet with the ghost, wagering for possession of the book, and through a combination of magic and cheating he won. Setna took the Book of Thoth and left the tomb, ignoring the ghost's final curse. And for a time, it seemed he had gotten away with his theft. He read the spells, he gained great power. He became the most feared magician in all of Egypt. But the curse was merely waiting. Setna fell in love with a beautiful woman who was actually a demon in disguise. She manipulated him into terrible acts, convinced him to kill his own children, drove him to the brink of madness. Only at the last moment, when he stood ready to commit the ultimate atrocity, did he wake from the spell and realize what he had almost done. It was all an illusion, Meria says quietly. A waking nightmare sent by Thoth to show Setna what his pride had brought him. The prince returned the book to Naneferkaptah's tomb and never sought forbidden knowledge again. He had learned at terrible cost that some things are not meant to be known. The old priest carefully rolls up the scroll and returns it to its case. This is why we guard certain texts so carefully, he says. Not because knowledge itself is evil, but because knowledge without wisdom can destroy. The Book of Thoth represents all the secrets of the universe, but even if it existed, even if someone could read it, they would be changed by what they learned and not necessarily for the better. You sit in silence, absorbing the tale. It reminds you of other lessons you have learned in your time at the temple. The balance of Ma'at, the weighing of the heart, the eternal struggle between order and chaos. Knowledge, like power, must be tempered with responsibility. Why did you show me this? You finally ask. Because you are ready to understand, Mariah replies, and because someday you may be the one guarding these texts, deciding who is ready to learn and who must be turned away. It is a heavy responsibility, young scribe, heavier than copying hymns or transcribing legends, but I believe you are equal to it. He leads you back through the secret passage and into his study. The hidden door closes behind you, becoming once again a seamless section of wall. Tell no one what you have seen tonight, Maria instructs. The hidden archive is a secret that has been kept for centuries. It will be kept for centuries more, but now you know it exists. And that knowledge carries its own weight. You bow deeply. I understand, honored one. I will be worthy of your trust. Meria smiles, and for a moment he looks almost fond. I know you will. Now go. Get some rest. Tomorrow is another day of sacred work. You walk back to your chamber in a daze, your mind spinning with everything you have learned. The hidden archive, the tale of Prince Setna, the terrible warnings about forbidden knowledge. It is a lot to process. But as you lie down on your reed mat and stare up at the ceiling, one thought rises above all the others. Maria believes in you. He trusts you with secrets that most people will never know exist. That trust is a gift more precious than any magic book could ever be. You close your eyes and drift towards sleep, dreaming of hidden chambers and ancient scrolls and the ibis-headed god who watches over all who seek wisdom. The Book of Thoth remains a mystery, locked away in legend and warning, and perhaps that is exactly as it should be. The festival of Wepet Rempet has arrived, the celebration of the new year that marks the rising of the star Sopdet and the beginning of the Nile's annual flood. It is one of the most important holidays in the Egyptian calendar, a time of feasting and celebration, of prayers for a good harvest and gratitude for another year of life. The temple of Karnak is transformed for the occasion. Flowers deck every doorway, incense burns in every chamber, filling the air with clouds of fragrant smoke. Musicians play in the courtyards, their drums and flutes creating melodies that drift through the complex like wandering spirits. The normally restricted inner sanctuaries have been opened to the public, allowing ordinary citizens to approach closer to the gods than they can at any other time of year. You have been given permission to wander freely today to observe the ceremonies and participate in the celebrations. It is a rare opportunity, and you intend to make the most of it. The main ceremonies are dedicated to Amun-Ra, of course, since this is his temple. You watch as the high priest enters the innermost sanctuary to bathe and dress the god statue, to offer food and wine and precious unguents. The doors are open just wide enough for you to glimpse the ritual, the flickering lamplight, the gleaming gold of the divine image, the priest's lips moving in prayers that have been recited unchanged for thousands of years. But it is not the ceremony itself that captures your imagination today. It is the variety of beliefs represented in the crowds around you. You have always known, in an abstract way, that different cities in Egypt have different creation stories, different hierarchies of gods, different explanations for how the world came to be. But seeing the festival crowds, hearing the snatches of conversation and prayer, brings this diversity to vivid life. Near the entrance to the great hypostyle hall, you encounter a group of pilgrims from Heliopolis, the city of the sun. They speak reverently of Atum, the complete one, who emerged from the waters of Nun on the first mound of creation. To them, Atum is the source of everything, the original god from whom all other gods descended. From Atum came Shu and Tefnut. One of them explains to a curious child. And from them came Geb and Nut. And from them came Osiris and Isis and Set and Nephthys. 9 gods in all. The great Ennead, the divine family that rules the universe. You recognize this version of creation? It is the one you copied in the legend of Osiris, the story of the gods born on the 5 extra days that Thoth won from the moon. But you notice that for these Heliopolitan pilgrims, Ra and Atum are essentially the same being, the sun god, in different forms and names. Moving deeper into the temple, you come across a different group, merchants from Memphis, who have traveled upriver for the festival. Their prayers are directed not to Amun or Atum, but to Ptah, the craftsman god, patron of their home city. In the beginning, one of them is telling his companions, "There was nothing but thought. Ptah conceived the world in his mind and spoke it into being with his tongue. Every god, every human, every animal and plant and stone, all were created by the divine word of Ptah." This version fascinates you. It is so different from the Heliopolitan account, where creation happened through physical processes, through sneezing and spitting and the union of male and female principles. The Memphite theology makes Ptah something like a cosmic architect, designing the universe in his imagination before building it with nothing but the power of speech. You think of your own work as a scribe, the way words give form to thought, the way a hymn or a story can shape how people understand the world. Perhaps the priests of Memphis chose Ptah as creator because they understood, better than most, the power of language and craft to bring new things into existence. As the afternoon progresses, you encounter still more variations. A group of priests from Hermopolis, far to the south, speak of the Ogdod, 8 primordial deities who existed before creation. These were not gods in the usual sense, but personifications of the primordial chaos, male and female pairs representing darkness and obscurity, endlessness and infinity, hiddenness and void, water and formlessness. The 8 existed in the waters of Nun. One priest explains, 4 frogs and 4 snakes swimming in the darkness. They came together and created a cosmic egg, and from this egg hatched the sun, bringing light and order to the chaos. The image is striking. You picture the primordial waters, dark and infinite, and the 8 strange beings moving through them, working together to create the first light. It is a very different story from Atum alone on his mound, or Ptah thinking the world into existence, but it carries the same essential truth. Out of chaos came order. Out of darkness came light. Out of nothingness came everything. And then there are the priests of Karnak itself, the servants of Amun, whose home you have shared for 5 years. Their theology is perhaps the most mysterious of all, for Amun is the hidden one, the god whose true nature cannot be known or described. Amun was before the beginning, the head priest explains during the evening ceremony. He was the hidden force within the waters of Nun, the potential that made creation possible. When he revealed himself, the universe came into being. But even now, he remains hidden within everything. The secret heart of existence that can be felt, but never seen. You stand in the great hypostyle hall, surrounded by towering columns carved with images of a moon, and you try to grasp this concept, a god who is hidden even when revealed, present in everything yet beyond all description. It's the kind of idea that makes your head spin if you think about it too hard. But perhaps that is the point. As the evening feast begins, you find yourself sitting next to an elderly scribe from Thebes, a man named Amenemhat, who has spent his entire life studying the various creation accounts. You share bread and beer and roasted duck, and you ask him the question that has been growing in your mind all day. How can all these stories be true? You keep your voice low, not wanting to seem disrespectful. Atom creating through sneezing, tar through speaking, the Ogdoad through cosmic eggs, Amun through self-revelation. They can't all have happened. Amenemhat smiles, his weathered face creasing with good humor. Cannot they? He takes a long drink of beer before continuing. Young scribe, you are thinking like a historian looking for a single factual account. But these are not history. They are theology. They are attempts to express truths that cannot be captured in simple facts. He gestures around the hall at the crowds of celebrants from all over Egypt. Each city developed its own understanding of creation based on its own experience. Heliopolis worshipped the sun, so naturally they imagined a sun god as creator. Memphis was a city of craftsmen, so they imagined a craftsman god who created through skill and words. Hermopolis observed the frogs and snakes that emerged from the mud after the flood, so they imagined primordial beings like frogs and snakes who created the world. But surely one of them must be more correct than the others. Amenemhat shakes his head. Think of it this way. If I asked you to describe the Nile, what would you say? You consider, I would say it is water flowing from the south to the north. I would describe its banks and its fish and the way it floods each year. Good. And if I asked a fisherman the same question, he would talk about the currents and the depths, the places where fish gather, the dangers of crocodiles and hippopotami. And if I asked a priest of Hapi, the god of the flood, he would speak of divine power, of the Nile as a living god that nourishes all of Egypt. Amenemhat spreads his hands. Are any of these descriptions wrong? They are all describing the same river, but from different perspectives with different purposes. The creation accounts are the same. They are all attempting to describe the indescribable, the moment when existence emerged from non-existence. Each one captures a piece of the truth, but none can capture all of it. So they are all true, in a sense. They are all true in the way that poetry is true. They reveal something real about the nature of existence, even if they cannot be reconciled into a single factual account. Amenemhat finishes his beer and sets down the cup. The divine is too vast to be contained in any single story. It takes all our stories, all our perspectives, all our different ways of understanding to even begin to grasp it. You sit with this idea as the feast continues around you. The music grows louder, the conversations more animated, the lamplight warmer as the night deepens. Somewhere outside, the star Sopdet is rising, heralding the flood that will renew the land for another year. And you think about all the stories you have copied, all the legends and hymns and sacred texts, the tale of Osiris and Isis, the journey of Ra through the underworld, the contest of Horus and Set, the shipwrecked sailor and his serpent friend, the warning of the Book of Thoth, each one a different window into the nature of existence, each one true in its own way. Perhaps that is what it means to be a scribe. Not just to preserve words on papyrus, but to preserve perspectives, ways of understanding, windows into the divine. The more stories you keep alive, the more complete the picture becomes. even if it can never be truly finished. The festival continues late into the night. You dance with the other celebrants. You sing hymns to Amun and Ra and all the gods who make the universe possible. You drink perhaps a bit too much beer and laugh perhaps a bit too loudly and feel, for one perfect evening, completely at home in this ancient temple surrounded by people who share your reverence for the sacred. When you finally stumble back to your chamber, the first hints of dawn are already lightening the eastern sky. Ra is being reborn after his nightly journey. The flood waters are beginning their annual rise. Another year is beginning. And you, young scribe, are part of the eternal pattern, the endless cycle of death and rebirth, chaos and order, story and meaning that has sustained Egypt since the first mound rose from the waters of none. However that actually happened. You smile at your own joke as you drift off to sleep, the sounds of the fading festival still echoing in your ears. Tomorrow, there will be more stories to tell. There are always more stories. The morning after the festival dawns bright and clear, and you wake with the peculiar mixture of tiredness and contentment that follows a night of celebration. Your head aches slightly from the beer, and your legs are sore from dancing, but these are small prices to pay for the joy you experienced. You rise slowly, moving through your morning rituals with more care than usual. The cool water on your face helps clear your head. The familiar weight of your apron settling over your shoulders grounds you in the present moment. By the time you descend to the scriptorium, you feel almost normal. The great work of copying the Osiris legend has been complete for some time now, but Maria has assigned you a final task. Today, you will add the colophon, the scribe's personal note that traditionally appears at the end of important documents. It is your chance to leave your own mark on the text, to add your voice to the chorus of scribes who have preserved this story across the centuries. You settle onto your cushion and unroll the completed scroll to its end. The papyrus is crisp and new, your hieroglyphs clean and clear. Looking at the finished work fills you with a quiet pride. This copy will outlast you by generations, perhaps by centuries. Long after your name has been forgotten, these words will endure. You select your finest pen, moisten your ink to the perfect consistency, and begin to write. Written by the scribe Ka in the house of life at Karnak, in the 5th year of the reign of his majesty. May he live forever. This text was copied from an ancient scroll found in a sealed chamber, dating from the time of the Middle Kingdom. May Thoth, Lord of divine words, bless this work and all who read it. May Osiris, Lord of the underworld, grant eternal life to those who honor his name. May Ma'at, Goddess of truth, weigh our hearts with mercy when we stand before the throne of judgment. You pause, considering what else to add. The colophon is traditionally brief, but Maria has given you permission to include a personal reflection. It is an unusual honor, and you want to make the most of it. I, Ka, have spent many days copying this legend, you continue. In that time, I have learned truths that I did not expect. I have learned that death is not an ending, but a transformation. I have learned that love is stronger than betrayal, that justice prevails even when the struggle is long and painful, that the darkness of night always gives way to the light of morning. These are not just stories of gods and heroes. They are maps of the human heart, guides for those who must navigate the mysteries of existence. When we read of Isis searching for her husband, we learn what it means to love without surrender. When we read of Horus fighting for his father's throne, we learn what it means to pursue justice with patience and courage. When we read of Ra battling the serpent of chaos each night, we learn that the struggle between order and destruction is eternal, but that order always triumphs in the end. May whoever reads these words in ages to come know that they were written with reverence and with love. May they feel the presence of the gods who inspired them, and may they carry these truths in their hearts as I carry them in mine. You set down your pen and read over what you have written. It is perhaps more personal than most colophons, more reflective, but it feels right. It feels true. You carefully clean your pen, let the ink dry thoroughly, and roll up the scroll for the final time. This copy is complete. It will be sealed and added to the temple archive, where it will join thousands of other texts in the eternal preservation of Egyptian wisdom. Moriah is waiting in his study when you bring him the finished scroll. He unrolls it carefully, reading through your colophon with an expression you cannot quite interpret. When he finishes, he looks up at you with something like respect. You have written well, young scribe. Not just the copy itself, but your personal words at the end. They show understanding, not just of the text, but of why we preserve these texts in the first place. Thank you, honored one. Moriah rolls up the scroll and sets it aside. Do you know what happens to these copies once they leave our hands? You shake your head. I assume they are stored in the archive to be consulted by future scholars. Some of them, yes, but others travel further. Maria rises and moves to his window, looking out over the temple complex. Copies of important texts are sent to temples throughout Egypt. They are given to nobles and officials who wish to have the sacred stories in their homes. Some are even placed in tombs to guide the deceased through the underworld. He turns back to you. The scroll you have just completed will go to the library at Memphis. From there, copies may be made and distributed even further. A century from now, your words might be read in temples that have not yet been built, by people who have not yet been born. The thought is overwhelming. You have always known, in an abstract sense, that the work of scribes is important, but hearing it stated so plainly, understanding that your own hands have contributed to something that will outlast you by generations, fills you with a humility that is almost painful. This is why we do what we do, Moriah continues. Not for gold or glory, not for the approval of pharaohs, but for the future. Every scroll we copy is a message sent forward in time, a voice speaking to people we will never meet. We are the bridge between past and future, the keepers of memory, the guardians of meaning. He places a gnarled hand on your shoulder. You have proven yourself worthy of this sacred trust car. I am proud to have you among our scribes. You bow deeply, unable to speak past the lump in your throat. When you straighten, Mariah is smiling. "Now go," he says. "Enjoy the rest of your day. Tomorrow there will be new texts to copy, new stories to preserve, but today you have earned a rest." You leave his study and walk slowly through the temple complex, seeing it with new eyes. The massive columns, the carved hieroglyphs, the statues of gods and pharaohs, all of this was built to last forever, to carry the memory and meaning of Egypt into an infinite future. And your work, humble as it seems, is part of that grand project. Your feet carry you, almost without conscious direction, to the sacred lake. The water is calm today, reflecting the blue sky and the golden stone of the surrounding buildings. You settle onto the stone steps in the same spot where you sat with old Passer when he told you the tale of the shipwrecked sailor. Fish move beneath the surface, dark shapes gliding through the green depths. Lotus blossoms float near the shore, their pink petals bright against the water. A ibis wades in the shallows, its curved beak probing the mud for food. Somewhere in the temple complex, a priest is chanting, the words too distant to make out, but the rhythm familiar and comforting. You think about everything you have learned and experienced since Mariah first handed you that ancient scroll. The legend of Osiris and Isis, the weighing of the heart, the nightly journey of Ra, the contest of Horus and Set, the shipwrecked sailor and his serpent friend, the warning of the Book of Thoth, the many versions of creation, and the wisdom of accepting multiple truths. Each story has left its mark on you, has added something to your understanding of the world and your place in it. You are not the same person who woke to the temple bells on that first morning, eager but ignorant, skilled but unwise. You have grown, changed, deepened, and yet you realize your journey has only begun. There are countless more texts in the House of Life, countless more stories waiting to be copied and understood. Each one will teach you something new, will add another layer to the tapestry of meaning that you are weaving with your life. The sun moves slowly across the sky, marking the hours with light and shadow. Ra's bark sails on, eternal and unceasing. The Nile continues its ancient flow, bringing life to the desert, nurturing the land that has sustained your people for thousands of years. And in the great temple of Karnak, in a small chamber that smells of papyrus and ink, a young scribe's work waits, ready to carry ancient wisdom into an unknown future. You rise from the steps as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon. Tonight, Ra will enter the underworld, will battle the serpent of chaos, will emerge victorious at dawn. Tonight the stars will wheel overhead in their eternal patterns, and Nut will swallow the sun and give birth to it again in the morning. And tomorrow you will return to the scriptorium. You will select a new text from the archive. You will dip your pen in ink and begin again the sacred work of preservation. Because the stories never end. They live in the scrolls and tablets, in the carved hieroglyphs on temple walls, in the painted scenes on tomb chambers. They live in the hearts of those who tell them and the minds of those who hear them. They are passed from generation to generation, changing slightly with each telling, but keeping their essential truth intact. You are part of that chain now. You are a link between past and future, a voice in the eternal conversation of humanity with itself. It is a small role, perhaps, in the grand sweep of history, but it is yours, and you will play it with all the skill and devotion you possess. The evening bells begin to ring, calling the faithful to prayer. You turn and walk back toward the temple, toward the life you have chosen, toward the work that gives that life meaning. Behind you, the sacred lake lies still and peaceful, holding the reflections of gods and mortals alike. Ahead of you, the temple of Karnak rises golden in the fading light, eternal and unchanging, a monument to the human need to remember, to understand, to reach toward the divine. And within you, the stories live on. The story of Osiris, who died and rose again. The story of Isis, who loved without surrender. The story of Horus, who fought for justice. The story of Ra, who battles darkness every night. The story of Maat, who weighs every heart. The story of Thoth, who gives wisdom to those who seek it. And your own story, still being written, still unfolding, still finding its place in the great pattern of existence. You smile as you enter the temple, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The eternal story continues, and that, my dear dreamers, is where we shall end tonight's tale. I hope you have enjoyed this journey through ancient Egypt, through its temples and legends and sacred mysteries. The stories we have shared tonight are thousands of years old, but their truths remain as fresh as ever. Love is stronger than death. Justice prevails in the end. The darkness always gives way to light. Carry these truths with you as you drift off to sleep. Dream of golden temples and sacred rivers, of gods who walk among mortals and mortals who reach toward the divine. And remember, always remember, that you too are part of the eternal story, a link in the chain that stretches from the first dawn to the last sunset. Until next time, dear friends, be safe and sweet dreams.